Shabbos even.
Shalom, everyone. Shlomo HaMelech writes, Davor be'itai matayv. A vort that is said in the proper time is especially good. And indeed, that is our situation in this Parsha. Parshat Emor has many, many mitzvahs. But one of the mitzvahs in Parshat Emor is the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer, that from the day that we bring the barley offering of the Omer on the second day of Pesach, we count 49 days, and then we celebrate Shavuos. This is the mitzvah of Sfira, and we always read it in the period of Sfiras HaOmer. There is a machlokes rishonim if Sfiras HaOmer bisman hazeh is da'oraisa or d'Rabbanan. Taisvus and most rishonim say Sfira bisman hazeh is d'Rabbanan because the Torah begins the count with the bringing of the Omer, and therefore, since we don't have a Beis HaMikdash and we don't bring the Omer bisman hazeh, Sfira is a zeicher lemikdash, as Ezak Taisvus. The Rambam, on the other hand, maintains that Sfiras HaOmer is independent of the Korban HaOmer, and therefore even when there's no Beis HaMikdash, and even when there's no Korban HaOmer, the Chiyuv of Sfira is D'Oraisa. So that's a very, very important machlokes regarding the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer. But what is the general idea of Sfiras HaOmer? So says the Sefer HaChinuch, it's in order to connect the holiday of freedom, which is Pesach, Zman Cherusenu, with the holiday of Torah, which is Shavuos. And as the Ramban writes, Sfiras HaOmer is like one long Chol HaMoed, connecting Pesach to Shavuos, because a freedom without Torah is not only worthless, but it's actually destructive. The tachlis of Cheres is to be able to serve Hashem. And that is why the Gemara says that the grain offering of Pesach, which is freedom, is barley, which is Michael Behema. And the grain offering of Shavuos, which is wheat, which is Michael Adam. Because a Cheres without Torah, you're like a wild animal. And only with the Torah does your life have direction and your life have purpose. And your freedom becomes meaningful. And therefore, in order that we should recognize that the tachlis of Cheres is Kabbalah Satira, we begin our counting to Shavuos on Pesach itself. But the kasha is, why do we begin the second day of Pesach, Mimacharas HaShabbos? Shabbos means Pesach over there, the day after the Yom Tov of Pesach. Why don't I begin at the Seder itself, the first Seder? Or in Eretz Yisrael, the only Seder. So the Sefer HaChinuch says that since the first night of Pesach we want to focus Legamri on Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's not nochon to bring in Shavuos, because Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha, you don't want to misharan, you don't want to mix one Simcha with another Simcha. But L'chaira, the Sefer HaChinuch is difficult to understand. Because if the pshat is that Matan Torah is the tachlis of the Cheres, Matan Torah is not another Simcha, it is the very event that gives meaning to the Simcha of Pesach. The Torah Tamima, Baruch Halevi Epstein, offers another reason why it's the day after Pesach, and he compares the 7 weeks of Shavuos, of the Omer leading up to Shavuos, to the 7 clean days of Anida, because Shavuos is like a wedding between Hashem and Am Yisrael, and just as a Kala needs 7 clean days, 7 days of purity, before she could be Nichnas L'chupeh, so we need 7 weeks of purity before we're Nichnas to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the same way a Nida has to have a Hefsek Torah, a day in which she begins her purity, but it cannot yet count as one of the 7 clean days. So the day of Pesach, we were still in Mitzrayim. It's either we had blood that day, and therefore it's the day of the Hefsek Torah, and therefore it does not count as one of the Zayin Nikiyim. We don't begin counting the Zayin Nikiyim till the next day, by analogy to the din of Hefsek Torah and Zayin Nikiyim of Anida. But the Baal Tanya in Likutei Torah offers another explanation, which I'm going to augment by a famous kasha of the Baal Shem Tov, which the Baal Tanya does not bring. And that is, Rav Nachman of Breslov brings it in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, that we sometimes find that when a person first does tshuva and comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's a tremendous geschmack, a tremendous passion, a tremendous simcha. Every mitzvah is so wonderful. But then the person gets habituated, and it becomes rote and routine, and they might lose their enthusiasm and lose their passion. How could that be? I understand that b'derech hateva, as you do something over and over and over again, it gets routine. But by mitzvahs, it vadai shouldn't be that way, because the more I'm doing mitzvahs, the greater my devekus in Hashem, the greater should be the joy in my neshama. So why does a person hit a plateau, which can sometimes be a gavaldige yerida? And the Baal Shem Tov gave a mashal, that when a baby first begins to walk, initially the parents are holding the baby's arms and the baby's shoulders, and the baby walks, and Baruch Hashem, everything is going great. And at some point, when the parents feel that the baby is ready, they let go. But when they let go, the baby falls and plops, and then struggles to get up. If the baby could verbalize his or her thoughts, the baby might think as a kasha, why was it so easy? Why was walking so geschmack 5 minutes ago? And now it's so hard. But the teretz is, 5 minutes ago it was easy because your parents were holding you up. But now you're big enough and strong enough and skilled enough that you have to make what your parents gave you your own. And that's going to be hard, and that's going to take work. But fakert, the fact that you're ready to work and to struggle, means your parents have confidence in you. Says the Baal Shem Tov, the same thing is true for the Chayzer B'tshuva. When the person was so far from Hashem, so Hashem had to bring him to him. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu carries him and shows him a great light and a great simcha. Because otherwise the person would never know the goodness and the beauty of Torah. But at some point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, now that I've shown you what you're capable of becoming, as a matana, I'm putting you down in the ground, and you have to achieve it yourself. I'm still here to help you, just as the parents will protect the baby. But you gotta make it your own. So says the Baal Shem Tov, when a person has yerides in Avodas Hashem, it's actually HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving him a vote of confidence. I'm no longer holding you. I'm no longer carrying you. You're big enough and strong enough and great enough to walk yourself. I'm always there with you. But you got to internalize the madregas that I've shown you. This is the mashal of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Tanya, without connecting it to this mashal, says this is the relationship between Pesach and Shavuos. Pesach was a tremendous, supernatural, miraculous revelation of the Shekhinah through the Makkos and Kriyas Yamsuf. And Chazal say even the lowly Shivcha Alayam saw more of the Kisei HaKavod than even Yecheskel HaNavi. And it was not a madrega that we earned. We were on the 49th level of Tumah. We had been Avdei Avodah Zarah. We were made for Bris Milah, except for Shevet Levi. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed us a tremendous Giloi, a tremendous light that we didn't earn, and to some degree we didn't even deserve. But after HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows us what it means to be connected to Hashem, and this was given to us as a matana that we didn't work on and we didn't deserve, Hashem puts us on the ground at the very bottom and says, now that I've shown you the top of the mountain, you have to laboriously, step by step by step, climb it yourselves. And thus, unlike Pesach, which is a sudden Gilui, the Gilui of Shavuos is Bahadraga. It's a gradual process. La'at, la'at, la'at. Pesach is what God gave us as a matana. Shavuos is what we give back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by our own avodah, our own yagia, our own striving, our own laborious effort of la'at, la'at, la'at. Because what is important in life is not what Hashem gives you. What is important in life are the madregos that you worked for. That's why they say the Vilna Gaon refused to even accept Divrei Torah that Malachim offered him. He only wanted what came from Yegiah. And this is why Sviras HaOmer is Mimacharas HaShabbos. Shabbos, which represents Pesach, is Matnas Chinam. But Mimacharas, the Omer is the next day. The Omer is the next step. The Omer is taking the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you and making them your own, which then in turn you give back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A good Shabbos.